Art Speak interns on seeing gender. How does your relationship to gender change in public versus private settings?
So it's this sort of interesting dynamic of like in public, you kind of have to conform to like what the public thinks of you. But in private, you can sort of invent that and embody that for yourself in a way. Whereas in public, like everyone else invents it for you. But that's something that I hope and that I think is changing. I think the differences would be like with the conversations that I have with people about gender. Like, for example, I think with my friends and people my own age, I'm a little bit more open and I don't really restrict myself if I am having conversations around gender. But sometimes with people who are a little bit older, and since my family does come from India, so there's a little bit of a difference in culture there. I find myself like restricting myself and kind of having inhibitions around conversations about gender, even though those do happen. Like, I'm fortunate enough to have a family who's open and accepting. I just think that the difference in like culture and age and generation does play a little bit into how open I am when discussing gender and like having conversations around that.
There's like the famous Margaret Atwood quote about like, you are your own voyeur, and that like everything women do is like a male fantasy. Like even pretending that we're like free of the male gaze and like aren't constantly like shackled by the male gaze. I don't know, I just think my own view of myself is so affected by misogyny, like even when I'm all alone. And obviously there's like no men around me, like I still can't, I'm still very conscious of like my femininity and like how I'm presenting. And it's almost like I can't just be myself, like I have to be a girl all the time.
In private settings, I feel a lot more comfortable, like I don't feel like I have to like change myself in any way. But when I'm in a public setting, around my peers and not around my friends, I feel like there's this constant need to like appeal to the male gaze.
I find myself in a lot of academic spaces that are dominated by men, and I have to be hyper aware all the time of how they are treating me and if I am being heard. And sometimes it just feels like I'm trying to strategize all the time about what's the best way to be both respected and heard and still valued. And it's really, really exhausting, honestly.
School had a huge impact on how I saw my gender when I was younger. When I think of the way that I felt about myself in the classroom, especially in elementary school, I just think of the word obligation. I remember so many times being paired up with boys who had maybe like behavioral issues or were just like not applying themselves in school and being expected to basically teach them and be their tutor under the guise of me learning how to work with people. And I just think of like the difference in the classroom being amplified by gender.
My relationship to gender changed a lot in public versus in private, because again, I was sort of obsessed with being like that perfect trans person and being very palatable and being very passable. And I'm kind of trying to change that about myself and challenge that, in my expression and in the way I present myself.
My body doesn't really completely belong to me because it's judged so much from outward society. But I think I'm trying to kind of regain that sense of control over the way I want to express myself in public spaces.
I definitely feel more comfortable like presenting as non-binary or presenting as androgynous now that I've been really just given the space to express myself however I want to, and to dress for the moment, to dress for the environment that I'm in. And when I go home, there is always kind of that thought in the back of my mind, or is somebody in my family going to say something about what I'm wearing right now? Or are they going to question what I'm doing? The other thing is like, here being constantly referred to as she and they, finally being comfortable referring to myself as they in conversation, which took me a long time to get comfortable with that. Then when I go home and, one of my parents refers to me as their daughter, or my siblings refer to me as their sister, it's like a little bit of a jolt for me, because it reminds me that like, really, I've created for myself these two different worlds that I'm now traveling back and forth between.
Learn more about the ArtSpeak internship at about.asianart.org/art-speak and on Instagram at ArtSpeakInterns. Credits: ArtSpeak interns and interviewees: Ollie Axelrod, Athena Chang, Ida Handwerker, Caden Honda, Athene La Jeunesse, Mindy Luo, Sophia Shen, Zora Ueda Hale, Sofia Valdez, Isha Venkatesh. Interviewer: Triana Patel. Editor: Lorraine Goodwin. Advisors: Maya Hara, Joanna Lee, Megan Merritt, Allison Wyckoff. Copyright 2021 Asian Art Museum. www.asianart.org